Okay, so week 4 is done. Week 5 is heading at us. And I just realized, and by the way, if you ever notice I do this, please post on Discord or directly to me through Canvas, is that I hadn't released week 5 yet. So it's funny, I remember looking at it, but I didn't release it. So I released week 5 and 6. So again, keep in mind, if you get to the end and there's no more content, make sure you hit me up because I try to always keep at least 2 weeks running. So, all right, so this week we got through our HTML CSS for beginners. And it seems like most of you enjoyed that work, which is great. I know that DevEd, this was kind of his, like he took all this content that he created, put it out on YouTube as just a big YouTube video, but then he went back and cleaned it up for his own course. But I really appreciated his style and the way he covered what he covered. So I'm glad to see that. So the one item I want to talk about is actually this item right here, which is adding CSS to your GitHub pages. And I want to be clear because a couple of you missed this, and it's really understandable why. But I said it in the video, so I'm going to repeat it here because we're at the place in this class where, and actually it happens next week, that I actually have you look at the requirements for your last project. Remember, this is a 9-week course. We are coming into week 5, which really means we have 4 weeks left. So having this in your mind as an understanding is really good. And even if you got it right, I think it may still help you. Okay. So I'm going to show you locally on my system. So remember, at this point, we are working locally in VS Code. And then once we've modified whatever it is we're working on, if that's the Learn Together, we're working in our private, if that's the hands-on or the current topics, if I do ask you to place something, let's say, into your public repo, those 2 repos are inside of our GitHub organization. So it's basically like a little place on GitHub where our course, we host GitHub, not Git. GitHub hosts our course. But there's another repo that I had you create for GitHub pages, and that repo is completely yours, not inside of our organization. But when I clone them locally, I actually clone them into the same directory, which may make you think they're the same, but I want you to know they're not the same, because in addition to being that your GitHub pages is only for you, only in your personal GitHub, in addition, the way we set it up, had you do this to create the repo name, actually renders as a web page. And that's important for a lot of different reasons, but mostly because your project 0 is going to be on that URL. So a couple of you did the work for adding CSS to your GitHub pages within your private, I believe most of them were private repos, and that's not the idea. Okay, so I just want to be clear about that. So let me actually switch over to my VS Code because I have it up. Just, reflect upon, like, I think most of you, from what looking at your print screens, you have recreated this folder structure that I recommend. Let me just make mine a little bigger so we can see it, right? So one of the things, I believe I've shown this, but I'll show it again, because when you're doing your Git workflow, right, let me just do this, right? The one thing you have to do is open a terminal and then navigate into that. I will tell you, doing the Git workflow can happen right here inside of VS Code, but I don't show it, nor do I recommend it for people that are new to this, because getting that command line experience is helpful. So, but if I was, okay, let's just say in here, I could come into this. Now, this is going to be a lot of directories and a lot of files because this is my version of what I've shown before for the Project Zero. So the work that you just did, let me be clear, the work of adding your style.css, linking it from your index page, right? That index page and that style sheet will be overwritten in the coming weeks as you choose a template for your Bootstrap, which we're starting Bootstrap next week. So just know that that work that you've done, and most of you seem to have fun with this, right? First, it's done on your GitHub IO. That's the first thing, and I'm just reiterating kind of what I was saying, what a few of you missed. But importantly, to understand the files that you've created will get overwritten by a template that you choose. So first, that. Now you might ask yourself, well, wait, if I got that wrong, can I redo it? And the answer is yes. You have to just think about, from a grading perspective, I do take off 25%. So if you're fixing that, which I think you should do anyway, I do late grade it. So just keep that in mind. It's 25% off, but it's better maybe than what you got. I can't remember what those grades were off the top of my head. So that. Here's the other thing I want to say. And one of the posts I saw talked about this, and especially if you're taking, which some of you are, my other, like JavaScript or Python, more of this related to JavaScript, is when you're looking at files, let me just show this here, right? If I pull up the index file, now this is going to look really busy because there's a lot in here. But if I wanted to look at this in a browser, right, there's two ways I could do this. I could right click, and in my case, I could say reveal in Finder. And what this would do now for those of you on Windows, you get File Manager, and then you see the index page, and then you double click. Now this is, again, my template that you're going to be doing soon, but I just want you to know. So that's one way to just render that index on your local system. The thing with that, and it's not a big deal, is that when you make changes in VS Code, you have to refresh. Well, first you have to save, which I have talked about, but make sure you have auto save because it's just better, right? Making sure you have that on there. But I'm going to tell you that here's what I do. You don't have to do this. There's two ways you can run a local server on your local system. And there is an extension. If you go in here and search for live server, I think it's live space server. Now, extensions are software that other people write that you then place or activate inside of your VS Code. Here's probably the most popular one, although I was reading this recently and the developer who wrote it isn't maintaining it. But it's good to know how to, and we saw some of this in your dev ed at the beginning, right? Some of you asked me about installing all those extensions. I don't require it, but this is just the same idea of installing an extension. So, but what I do, and I'm going to bring you back here because first I'm going to do open an integrated terminal. Now you may not have Bash, you may have PowerShell or something else. That's fine. Typically Bash works great because when you install Git, that Bash command line is in there. So for me, if I wanted to, and I do ls here, again, you learned some commands recently about this, right? But I installed into my local environment, not an extension, which is an extension is fine, but I had actually installed live server into my system doing npm, I'm going to clear this, npm I or install, okay, and then live server. Now, I don't require this, I'm just telling you, okay? So when you do that, and you'll learn this more as the more development you do, you're installing a package on your system. So always be a little bit like, do your research about that, see who is maintaining it, see how current it is. It is widely used. This is not the only way to run a local server. There are other ways as well, and it's not required. Now, why do I do it? And now, because I've already installed mine and I have this repo in my terminal, I would just type live server, and what it will do is it will look in this folder, which in this case is my GitHub IO repo on my local system. And now you might go, well, this doesn't look any different. And the answer is it doesn't, but it does something called hot reload, to where whenever I change something in the HTML, CSS, or something else, it automatically changes here in a rendered site versus having to hit refresh. Now, this may not seem like a big benefit. There's more benefits the further you get into development, because you're often running things that you need to have that server locally so you can see how things hit the web and other functionality you want to test. Right now, it's not as big of a deal for us, but I just wanted you to know. So just to conclude where I started, what happened was several of you did the work up here where you added CSS into somewhere in your private directory. And I want you to know that's not the idea. The idea was that you added it to your GitHub IO. And then what you'd want to do after that, of course, is complete the Git workflow once you modified that. Now I'm going to do Control C to stop it. Once you have to modify that index file, right? Add that CSS, do that linking, and then implement, of course, write some CSS, have some HTML code that you're targeting that CSS into, and then do your Git workflow to push that out to your GitHub IO repo. And that's the URL I was looking for last night. Okay? So hopefully if you have a question, that helped clear it up. Okay, so, and then I really enjoyed the comments from the Web 2.0. Not that it's completely related, but there was a documentary I watched just this week called Feels Good Man. And it's about Pepe the Frog, and it's about internet culture, and it's about how Pepe, who was originally created by an artist, was co-opted for other purposes that the artist didn't intend, of course. But it's an interesting story of how we use the web today. Of course, how we use the web is very complicated because it's individual, but it's also collective. But anyway, if you want to check it out, I think I saw it on Amazon Prime, but it's worth watching. It's called Feels Good Man. And I suspect most of you have seen images of Pepe the Frog, but you may not know the history of it. Okay, so next week, let me leave it here. So we're going to start a new course, which means you start a new folder. Again, when you're doing the code alongs, those are done inside of the private repo. When you're doing print screens, those are in the public. But when you're working, which this week we're not working on your GitHub IO site, but I do have a draft of the requirements, and you can see that. But this is the week for learning Bootstrap. Next week, I believe we're going to choose a Bootstrap template. And then what you will see pretty much starting after this week is each week you will have something related to your Project Zero. That's what I wanted to say. Let's just show this, right? And it's worth talking about right here at this point in the semester. And I'm going to take off my other classes and I'll put on 82 where we're at. Oh, we have a holiday. When do we have a holiday? That's not today. I'm like, wait a minute. Oh yeah, it's next Friday, but I still have Thursday night items. But Monday, okay, that's good to remember. Okay, so this is good that I looked at this because I'll just let you know for any item that falls on a holiday, what I do is I move it one day forward. So anytime that that's the case, just know. And I've just shown you there. Now, because the other one was not on a holiday, I don't move it. So what I was really here to show you is this, which is that if I roll forward all the way through to March, right? So here we are in February, roll forward. Oh, actually, it's the end of February. Oh yeah, so it's actually just end of March there. So, so your project zero, your last thing to do for this class is March 4th, which is the end of the class. The 25% of your grade is related to this project, and it's all about building a site with the requirements that I laid out. You're doing it on your GitHub IO site. So you're working on a real website. Many people choose to do, and don't take this term wrong, but it's just how it's termed, a vanity site about themselves. That's what I did. I had used to have it done differently, but I decided that I'm going to give more flexibility about how you choose what topic you want to do. So just FYI. All right, have a great weekend and enjoy the beautiful weather that we are experiencing right now. And let me know if you have any questions. Peace out.